Imagine opening an English book, watching your favorite movie, or listening to a podcast, and suddenly realizing that you understand almost everything without translating every single word in your head. Sounds impossible. Actually, it's not. Most people believe that learning English vocabulary means sitting with long lists of words, repeating them again and again, and hoping they'll somehow stay in their memory. But here's the surprising truth. Research in cognitive psychology and language acquisition shows that this method is one of the least effective ways to build a lasting vocabulary. In fact, studies by psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus, famous for developing the forgetting curve, revealed that people forget most newly memorized information within days unless it is repeatedly used in meaningful situations. That's why so many English learners spend months memorizing vocabulary, yet struggle to remember even basic words during real conversations. Now think about this. How did you learn your first language? Did your parents hand you a dictionary and ask you to memorize 20 new words every day? Of course not. You learned by hearing words repeatedly, seeing them used in different situations, connecting them with people, emotions, actions, and experiences. Your brain naturally built those connections over time. This process is called contextual learning, and according to linguist Stephen Krashen's input hypothesis, people acquire language most effectively when they understand meaningful messages rather than isolated vocabulary. In other words, your brain loves stories, conversations, emotions, and repetition in context. It hates random word lists. The good news is this: you don't need extraordinary memory. You don't need to memorize thousands of flashcards. You simply need to train your brain the way it was designed to learn language. Let's begin with a simple question. Why do vocabulary lists fail for so many learners? Imagine seeing these words on a page. Abandon, achieve, accept, accident, across, accurate. You read them 5 times, maybe 10 times tomorrow. You remember half next week. You remember almost none. Why? Because these words have no emotional meaning. They're just symbols on paper. Your brain treats them as unimportant information. Neuroscientists explain that our memory works through associations. The more connections a piece of information has, the easier it becomes to remember. A random vocabulary list has almost no connections. But a story, a conversation, or a personal experience creates dozens of mental links at once. Let's take one simple word, journey. Instead of memorizing its dictionary definition, imagine this sentence. My journey to becoming fluent in English started with just 10 minutes of practice every day. Now your brain connects the word journey with progress, learning, determination, and maybe even your own goal of speaking English confidently. Suddenly, the word becomes memorable. This is exactly how fluent speakers build vocabulary. They don't memorize isolated words. They collect experiences with words. There's another fascinating discovery from psychology known as the levels of processing theory, developed by Fergus Craik and Robert Lockhart. Their research showed that information processed deeply, through meaning and understanding, is remembered far better than information processed only through repetition. Reading a word 20 times is shallow processing. Using that same word in a meaningful sentence, imagining it, hearing it, and saying it aloud creates deep processing. And deep processing builds long-term memory. Now here's something that surprises many learners. Native English speakers don't know every word in the dictionary. In fact, they continue learning new words throughout their lives simply by reading books, watching videos, having conversations, and living their daily lives. Vocabulary growth never really stops, so your goal shouldn't be to memorize every word. Your goal should be to create an environment where new words naturally become part of your life. Let's look at another example. Suppose you learn the word curious. You could memorize this definition. Curious means eager to know or learn something. Or you could hear this sentence. The little girl was curious about how airplanes fly, so she spent hours watching science videos. Immediately, your brain creates an image. A child, airplanes, science, curiosity, multiple connections. The word now has life. That's exactly what you want for every new English word. Psychologists also explain something called retrieval practice. Every time you successfully remember a word from memory instead of simply rereading it, the memory becomes stronger. That's why passive learning feels productive. But active recall creates real progress. Think about riding a bicycle. You don't become good by reading instructions. You become good by riding. Language works exactly the same way. You don't become fluent by collecting vocabulary. You become fluent by using vocabulary. And here's one of the biggest mistakes learners make. They wait until they know enough words before they start speaking. But speaking is actually what helps you remember the words. It's a cycle. Learn, use, forget a little, use again, remember longer, use naturally. Eventually, the word becomes automatic. This process is completely normal. Even children forget words before mastering them. Failure isn't a sign that you're learning incorrectly. It's actually part of how memory grows stronger. There's another powerful concept called comprehensible input. This means exposing yourself to English that is just slightly above your current level. If everything is too easy, your vocabulary won't grow. If everything is too difficult, your brain becomes frustrated. The sweet spot is material where you understand about 95% of the content while learning the remaining few words naturally from context. This principle has been supported by decades of language acquisition research and is one of the reasons graded readers, beginner podcasts, and simplified English videos are so effective. Think about watching a movie. You hear the sentence, "I was exhausted after work." Maybe you've never learned the word exhausted, but the actor is breathing heavily. He looks tired. He sits down immediately. Without opening a dictionary, your brain already guesses the meaning. That's natural language learning in action. And every time you hear that word again in different situations, your understanding becomes stronger. No memorization required. By the end of this video, you'll discover a practical system that allows you to build a vocabulary of over 1,000 useful English words naturally, through reading, listening, speaking, and daily habits that take less time than you probably spend scrolling on social media. The goal isn't to study harder. The goal is to learn smarter. Because the most successful English learners don't have better memories. They simply have better learning systems. And once you understand that system, learning English becomes dramatically easier. Now that you understand why traditional vocabulary lists often fail, let's talk about something much more exciting. How people actually learn hundreds and even thousands of English words naturally. The first method is something you have probably heard before, but most learners use it incorrectly. Read for meaning, not for vocabulary. Many learners open an English article and stop every few seconds to check a new word. They translate everything. They write every unfamiliar word into a notebook. After 10 minutes, they feel exhausted. But fluent learners do something different. They focus on understanding the overall message. Imagine reading this sentence. The weather was gloomy, but the children continued playing in the park. Maybe you don't know the word gloomy, but you understand the rest of the sentence. The weather is being contrasted with children happily playing. Your brain starts making a guess. Perhaps gloomy means dark. Perhaps gloomy means rainy. Perhaps gloomy means unpleasant. And you would be close. This guessing process is incredibly powerful because it forces your brain to interact with the language instead of depending on translation. Research in language acquisition consistently shows that learners retain vocabulary better when they infer meaning from context rather than immediately looking up definitions. So the next time you read something in English, don't stop for every unknown word. Keep reading. Trust your brain. Allow context to teach you. You may be surprised by how much you understand. The second method is one of the fastest vocabulary-building tools ever discovered. Learn words through stories. Humans are storytelling creatures. Long before books existed, people remembered information through stories. Our brains are wired to store narratives, think about this, which is easier to remember, a random word like rescue, or a story about a firefighter rescuing a family from a burning building. The answer is obvious. Stories create emotion. Emotion creates memory. That's why reading short stories, novels, biographies, and even watching movies can dramatically increase your vocabulary. Every story introduces words in meaningful situations. Every character creates emotional connections. Every scene helps words stick naturally. This is why many language experts recommend extensive reading. The more stories you consume, the larger your vocabulary becomes, without memorization, without stress, without endless repetition. The third method is called narrow input. This technique is surprisingly simple. Choose one topic that genuinely interests you. Maybe it's football, maybe it's business, maybe it's fitness, maybe it's technology. Now consume English content about that topic every day. Here's why it works. When you repeatedly explore the same subject, the same vocabulary appears again and again. For example, if you love football, you'll repeatedly encounter words such as goal, coach, defender, strategy, tournament, champion, performance, victory. At first, these words seem new. But after seeing them 20 or 30 times in articles, videos, interviews, and discussions, they become automatic. No memorization needed, just exposure. This technique is incredibly effective because repetition happens naturally. Your brain sees the same vocabulary in different situations and gradually absorbs it. The fourth method is one of the most overlooked secrets in language learning. Listen before you study. Many learners spend hours reading vocabulary lists but very little time listening. The problem is that real language is spoken, not memorized. When you hear words repeatedly, your brain begins recognizing patterns automatically. Think about a child learning language. Children hear words thousands of times before they fully understand them. Your brain works the same way. Listen to podcasts, listen to audiobooks, listen to YouTube videos, listen while walking, listen while exercising, listen while traveling, even if you don't understand everything. Because every hour of listening exposes you to hundreds of vocabulary words in their natural environment. Over time, those words stop feeling unfamiliar. They become part of your mental vocabulary. The fifth method is extremely powerful, and almost nobody uses it consistently. Create personal connections. Let's imagine you learn the word determined. You could memorize the definition, or you could connect it to your life. For example, I am determined to improve my English this year. Suddenly, the word becomes personal, and personal information is easier to remember. Psychologists call this the self-reference effect. Research has repeatedly shown that information connected to ourselves is remembered far better than information that feels unrelated. So whenever you learn a new word, ask yourself, how does this relate to my life? Can I use this word in a sentence about myself? Can I connect it to my goals, my family, my experiences? The more personal the connection, the stronger the memory. Now let's move to method number 6. This one can completely transform your vocabulary growth. Learn phrases, not individual words. Many learners study words alone, for example, decision, opportunity, challenge, success. But native speakers rarely use isolated words. They use phrases, for example, make a decision, great opportunity, a challenge, achieve success. Learning vocabulary in chunks helps your brain understand how words naturally work together. Linguists often call these combinations collocations, and mastering collocations makes your English sound dramatically more natural. Instead of learning one word, you're learning an entire usable expression. That means faster speaking, better understanding, and stronger memory. Now here's method number 7. Perhaps the most important method of all. Use English every day, even for 5 minutes. Consistency beats intensity. A person who studies English for 10 minutes every day will often outperform someone who studies 3 hours once a week. Why? Because memory strengthens through frequent contact. Every time you encounter a word again, Your brain reinforces the neural pathways connected to that word. Imagine planting a tree. You don't pour an entire year's worth of water on it in one day. You water it consistently. Vocabulary works exactly the same way. Small daily exposure creates massive long-term growth. 5 minutes today, 5 minutes tomorrow, 5 minutes next week. Months later, the results become extraordinary. This idea is supported by the work of James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, who explains that tiny improvements repeated consistently produce remarkable outcomes over time. And that's exactly how vocabulary growth happens, not through dramatic effort, but through small daily actions repeated again and again. Now you might be wondering, how many words can someone realistically learn this way? The answer is far more than most people imagine. If you naturally acquire just 5 useful words per day through reading, listening, and conversation, that's over 1,800 words in a year. 5 words, not 50, not 100, just 5. The secret isn't speed. The secret is consistency. And once you stop trying to force vocabulary into your memory and start allowing it to grow naturally through meaningful exposure, learning English becomes less like studying and more like living. In the next part, we're going to build a simple daily routine that can help you learn more than 1,000 English words naturally, explain the biggest mistakes that slow vocabulary growth, and show exactly how successful English learners turn everyday activities into powerful language practice. Now it's time to put everything together into a simple daily system. The truth is, you don't need 5 hours a day to build a powerful English vocabulary. You need a routine that your brain can repeat consistently. Language learning isn't a sprint, it's a habit. And habits, repeated over time, create extraordinary results. Imagine waking up tomorrow and spending just 10 minutes reading an English article about a topic you genuinely enjoy. Don't read to find new words. Read to understand the message. If you come across an unfamiliar word but still understand the sentence, keep going. Let your brain make a guess. You'll be surprised how often your guess is correct. Later in the day, while traveling, exercising, or relaxing, listen to an English podcast or YouTube video on the same topic. Suddenly, some of the words you read in the morning appear again. This second exposure tells your brain, this word is important. That simple repetition strengthens your memory without any conscious memorization. In the evening, spend just 5 minutes speaking to yourself in English. Describe your day, talk about what you learned, explain the video you watched. Don't worry about making mistakes. Mistakes are not proof that you're failing. They're proof that your brain is practicing. Think about a baby learning to walk. The baby falls hundreds of times before walking confidently. Nobody says, maybe walking isn't for you. Falling is part of learning. The same is true for speaking English. Every mistake teaches your brain something valuable. One of the biggest reasons people forget vocabulary is because they recognize words but never use them. There's a huge difference between recognizing a word and being able to produce it during a conversation. Psychologists call this the difference between passive vocabulary and active vocabulary. Passive vocabulary includes words you understand when reading or listening. Active vocabulary includes words you can confidently use while speaking or writing. Your goal isn't just to recognize words. Your goal is to move them from passive memory into active use. How do you do that? Use every new word within 24 hours. Let's say you learn the word confident. Instead of simply reading it, create sentences like, I want to become more confident when speaking English. My friend is confident during job interviews. I practice, the more confident I become. Simple sentences are often more valuable than reading the same definition 20 times. Another powerful technique is called spaced repetition. This doesn't mean memorizing endless flashcards. It simply means revisiting useful words after increasing intervals. You might see a word today, then tomorrow, then 3 days later, then a week later, and then a month later. Every successful recall strengthens the memory and makes forgetting less likely. Now let's talk about something many learners ignore. Your environment. Look around you. How much English do you actually see every day? If English only appears during your study session, your brain treats it like schoolwork. But if English becomes part of your daily environment, Your brain begins treating it as a normal part of life. Change your phone language to English if you're comfortable doing so. Follow English-speaking creators on social media. Read English headlines instead of translated news. Watch YouTube in English. Listen to English music and try to notice repeated phrases. Little by little, English stops feeling foreign. It becomes familiar. And familiarity is one of the greatest teachers. There's another common mistake that keeps learners stuck. They chase difficult words because they think advanced vocabulary sounds impressive. But fluent communication isn't about using rare words. It's about using common words naturally. Think about the most successful English speakers you admire. They often use simple language with confidence and clarity. Learning the 1,000 most frequently used English words gives you access to a huge percentage of everyday conversations. That's why mastering common vocabulary first is much more valuable than memorizing complicated words you'll rarely use. Here's another habit that can dramatically improve your vocabulary. Become curious. Whenever you hear an interesting word, don't just ask, "What does it mean?" Ask, "When do people use it? What words usually come before it? What words usually come after it? What emotion does it express? What situation is it describing?" These questions create deeper understanding, and deeper understanding creates stronger memory. Let's imagine you hear the word relieved. Instead of memorizing, relieved means feeling happy because something difficult is over. Imagine this sentence: "I was relieved after finishing my English exam." You can almost feel the emotion. That's exactly how your brain remembers language. Emotion plus context equals long-term memory. Another important lesson is to stop comparing yourself with others. Some people appear to learn English very quickly, others need more time. But language learning isn't a race. Everyone starts from a different place. Everyone has different experiences. The only comparison that matters is between who you were yesterday and who you are today. If you know 5 more useful words than you knew last week, you're making progress. If you understand 1 more sentence than you understood last month, you're improving. Small victories eventually become massive achievements. Remember this: fluency isn't built in one extraordinary day. It's built through hundreds of ordinary days, every page you read, every podcast you hear, every conversation you attempt, every mistake you correct, every sentence you speak. They're all building something bigger than you can see. Your vocabulary is growing, even when it doesn't feel like it. Just like a tree grows silently underground before anyone notices the branches. In the final part of this video, I'll give you a simple 30-day vocabulary challenge that you can start today. Explain how to measure your progress without counting words, and leave you with one powerful idea that could completely change the way you learn English forever. Now you've reached the final part of this journey. By now, you've learned something that many English learners never realize. Building a vocabulary of 1,000 words isn't about having a perfect memory. It's about creating the right learning environment. When English becomes part of your everyday life, your vocabulary begins to grow almost automatically. So let's turn everything you've learned into one simple challenge. I call it the 30-Day Natural Vocabulary Challenge. For the next 30 days, don't memorize word lists. Instead, follow these 5 simple habits. First, read something in English for 10 minutes every day. Choose content you genuinely enjoy. It could be a short article, a story, a blog, or even the subtitles of a YouTube video. Your goal is not to translate every word. Your goal is to understand the message. Second, listen to English for at least 15 minutes every day. Listen while walking, exercising, cooking, or traveling. Don't worry if you miss some words. Your brain is still learning the rhythm, pronunciation, and vocabulary of the language. Third, speak English for 5 minutes every day. Speak to yourself if you don't have a partner. Describe your room, explain your plans, talk about your favorite movie, tell a story from your childhood. The topic doesn't matter. What matters is using the words you already know. Fourth, write 3 simple sentences using words you recently learned. Don't copy examples from the internet. Create your own. Personal sentences are much easier to remember because they connect the language with your own experiences. And finally, revisit yesterday's words naturally. Read the same article again, watch the same video, or use the same vocabulary in another conversation. This gentle repetition is far more effective than cramming hundreds of words into your brain in one sitting. Now you may ask, how do I know if my vocabulary is improving? Here's the answer. Don't count how many words you've memorized. Instead, notice what you can do. Can you understand more of a YouTube video without subtitles? Can you read an article faster than before? Can you explain your ideas with less hesitation? Can you recognize words that once seemed completely unfamiliar? These are the real signs of progress. Language learning is about increasing your ability to communicate, not collecting vocabulary like stamps in an album. Research in second language acquisition consistently shows that successful learners focus on understanding and communication first. Vocabulary grows as a result of meaningful exposure and repeated use. In other words, fluency is not built by memorizing words. Fluency is built by living with the language. There will be days when you feel stuck. You'll read a page and understand very little. You'll watch a video and miss half the words. You'll try to speak and forget simple vocabulary. Don't let those moments discourage you. Every fluent English speaker has experienced exactly the same feeling. Progress in language learning is often invisible. Think about going to the gym. After one workout, you don't see a dramatic difference. After 1 week, the changes are still small. But after 6 months of consistent effort, the transformation becomes impossible to ignore. Vocabulary works the same way. Each article you read adds another brick. Each podcast adds another brick. Each conversation adds another brick. Each mistake you correct adds another brick. One brick may seem insignificant, but thousands of bricks build a house. And thousands of meaningful encounters with English build fluency. There's a famous quote by the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu: "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." Learning 1,000 English words begins the same way, not with 1,000 flashcards, not with 1,000 definitions, but with one meaningful sentence. One interesting story, one conversation, one day of consistent practice, then another, and another. Remember, your brain was designed to learn language. You proved that when you learned your first language as a child. The ability is still there. The only difference is the method. Stop fighting your brain with endless memorization. Start working with it. Read what you enjoy. Listen every day. Speak without fear. Learn words in context. Use them in real life. Repeat naturally. Trust the process. Months from now, you'll look back and realize something incredible. You won't remember the exact day your vocabulary improved. You'll simply notice that English feels easier. You'll understand more. You'll speak with greater confidence. You'll think less about translating. And one day, you'll be having a conversation in English when you suddenly realize you're no longer searching for every word. The words are finding you. That's the power of learning naturally. If this video helped you see vocabulary learning in a new way, remember that fluency isn't reserved for people with exceptional talent. It's available to anyone willing to practice consistently and trust the process. Thank you for watching. Keep reading, keep listening, keep speaking. And most importantly, never stop learning, because every new word is another step toward the confident English speaker you're becoming. I'll see you in the next video.